Hello. This is so different now. My God. Okay. This is so different now, the way Facebook Lives look in the group. But it looks like it's all good. So definitely not centered. Oh, my pedanticness. Anyway, how are we today? Happy Friday. Happy Thursday if you're somewhere else in the world. It's Thursday evening. What a week. Oh my God. Like, what a month. Right. It's the kind of getting towards the last week of April. Oh dear. Um, it's been wild, right? I have to admit, I went down the rabbit hole this week. The rabbit hole of all different theories and things that are going on in the world right now. And this is not the place for me to talk about them, but it's definitely been an interesting week. Um, yeah. Yeah. So as you hop on, say hi. I don't even know why I'm talking about that. Um, what I want to talk to you guys today about is follow up. Follow up. How exciting! Who doesn't love chatting about follow up, right? It's like the thing no one wants to talk about. But it's a thing that can seriously change your conversion rate and can seriously like change your business, right? So I want to talk about it because it's been something I've been working on for probably like the last 6 months. And I've had some really interesting conversations with clients about it recently, and they've gotten so much value out of me sharing some of the stories of my own follow-up process. Morning, Dee. How are you? Good to see you here. I've been sharing some of just like the personal stories of like my client journey. Hi, Maria. Lovely to see you. Some of just the stories of my personal experience with clients and follow up, because I think it's not what we're seeing when people are saying like, I signed 5 clients this week and I had my 10K month and I had all the amazing things, right? And we're just often not seeing the back process of that, right? So I think it's important to share it because it's probably something that you may not have even really thought about before. And it's something that changes your conversion, but also that you have to put time into, right? And I think it's something I don't see a lot of people talking about. So I know it's been valuable to my clients to hear a bit about my follow-up process. And I wanted to share with you the why first and then talk about kind of the process I use. And then I'll share some stories just to highlight that it's not always as simple as someone books a discovery call, they say yes, the next day they're your client. It just doesn't always work like that, unfortunately. So good news, bad news is that if you're experiencing that you're needing to follow up with people and have a lot more like touch points along the way, that's okay. It's completely normal. And also it's permission piece to actually do the follow up, because I see it's the thing a lot of people are resisting. So let's just start at the top. Like, what is follow up? Okay. So follow up for me, and just feel free to chime in with questions. I love that there's people on, just questions, things that resonate, experiences you've had. I always love hearing about those things. So I guess then I'll ask you guys a question. Who follows up after a discovery call if someone doesn't say yes on the call? Just love to hear your thoughts there. So follow up, that's exactly how I view follow up, is like after someone has had that initial outreach to you. So even sometimes there's follow up, even just to get someone onto a discovery call, I've found too. So sometimes people reach out, they're interested in a discovery call, you kind of put it out there like, this is how you book it, or this is how you book my free call, or take this next step. And even then they can kind of ghost or disappear, right? And so then there's still a journey of following up. But I'm really focusing on like past that initial sales discussion today. So I see follow up as the process after I've had an initial either discovery call, or I offer like free value-based calls, after the process of having had that time with that person, and then kind of the communication that happens afterwards. So most of my follow-up is via email, but sometimes I'll invite people onto a second call if they've got a lot of questions and that kind of thing. So I'm just playing with this because it's a bit funny. So that's how I view follow-up. So why do I follow up 6 times? This is not something I used to do, guys. Major resistance. Like, I've really only started doing this since I've been working with my current coach. So about 6 months. She is a big advocate of following up. and I can see why now. So the first thing is, I was just on Google yesterday, like pulling up some stats, and I just want to share this with you because it's pretty mind-blowing. These are stats from like salespeople, and I know Dee, you've worked in sales role before. Okay, I don't know if this is going to be backwards. Is it backwards? 80% of sales require 5 follow-up calls after the meeting, right? 80% of sales require 5 follow-up calls after the meeting. 44% of sales reps give up after 1 follow-up. So what that's saying is 80% of deals close or clients sign or whatever you're in the business of selling. I'm just talking more generally about selling here, not necessarily about coaching, but 80% of sales close after a 5th follow-up. Bring. So what most people are doing is they're following up once or twice and not hearing anything or not hearing back, and they're saying that person's a no without actually knowing that, okay? So that's been a huge shift for me in terms of going, I'm going to follow up people to that 6th point, and at that point then I'll redecide, are they still engaged in the process and do they still need continued follow-up, or have I shown up for the process like the way that I need to, and I'll not that I'll let them go, but like I've given, I've put the energy in, because follow-up is actually about helping that person. It's not about getting the sale, okay? I think that's a big shift for me in terms of the mindset, because here's how I view it. Indecision is the worst place you could be sitting, okay? So interesting, I always did 3 follow-ups after first quote to customer. I should have done 5. Exactly, right? So there's lots of stats on there. It's quite interesting. That's saying like, it's the 5th one where people are like, oh yes, like I'm finally ready, right? Like there's so many things going on in people's lives. So yes, like they could have completely changed your sales trajectory, Dee, but it's something to just keep in mind going forward. Now, I view the follow-up not as something that's serving me in getting a sale, although that is a nice byproduct, but it's about serving that person. Because here's how I view it. If someone's reached out to me and either booked a discovery call or had a free like value-based call with me, they on some level are looking for the support that I offer, right? I view indecision as the worst place someone can be, right? My job is to help someone get to a decision. I don't actually mind if it's a yes or if it's a no. I literally I'd much rather someone go like, no, this isn't the right thing for me, than someone to continue to stay undecided, right? It doesn't serve you as it doesn't serve you as a person who's like looking for support in your business if you still are undecided, because you're procrastinating, you're in indecision, you're not moving. And it doesn't serve me as someone who's like, do I need to give you more information? Is there something I need to help you? Like, what is it that's not, making like this clear for you? Are you a yes or are you a no? I'm going to do another training another day about like why I think having a problem with saying no is like a bit of an issue in our industry, but that's like a whole different topic, right? If you're not willing as a person who's taken someone else's time to kind of go like, no, I'm not interested, and like, thanks, but no thanks, then it's something you need to look at as a coach, as a business owner, as a person, right? It's kind of, why do you struggle to say no, right? And just tell someone like, I'm not interested in the service you had. But that's a different topic we'll dive into. So that's the first thing around the sales process. So Sam, how long do you leave between following up when they haven't replied to you? Cool. I'll dive into that in a sec. So that's kind of why initially I follow up, and why I view it. This is the big shift, because I used to view it as kind of like hassling people. I'm hassling people. I'm trying to get a sale, blah, blah, blah. And now I'm like, no, I'm trying to guide them out of indecision. I want someone to just, because I've talked about this before as well, like trust in themselves, back themselves, make a decision and trust that they've made the right decision and move forward. If you're looking for help in your business and you've had a discussion with me and you actually feel like you're not the right person for me, then that's helpful to know, because you say, no, Laura, like you weren't the right person for me. I'm actually looking for someone with a different skill set or a different thing or a different program or a different way of working. That's helpful to the client, because then they're moving forward. They're like, oh, I've realized I'm a no on this because of these reasons. And what I'm actually looking for is this. So they're continuously moving forward. If they're in indecision or they're feeling stuck around it, like that doesn't serve them. So that's been a big shift for me in the way of thinking about it, right? And I know that's what a lot of people feel a pain point around is if I'm following up people, I'm hassling them, right? I'm hassling them. And it's just not true. I think you can definitely flip that on. I'm serving them, I'm helping them. I want to help them get to a clear decision, and I'm kind of okay whatever decision they make. So big mindset shift. And that's really helped me. So I've kind of now just decided my process is that I follow up with everyone 6 times. And at that point, I'll redecide, do I need to continue to follow up this person? Or like, have I shown up for my business process as a CEO, right? And like, I've done my part in helping them make a decision. And if they're kind of not engaged in the process, there's not much more I can kind of do, right? So that's kind of the first thing on the follow-up. So let me know if there's any questions on that. Does that kind of resonate? Does that make sense? Does that feel kind of sticky? Like, what kind of coming up there? I bet you love the sound of me drinking water through the microphone. It sounds good, doesn't it? Okay, cool. So that's the initial piece, like why I follow up 5 times. There's heaps of stats, guys. Go and Google, just like Google like sales process conversion rates. I love that. Helping them move from indecision to a firm yes or no as a customer sitting in indecision is the worst. It's literally the worst, right? And if you're wanting to move forward and achieve a goal and you're stuck in indecision because like, you know, I see it as my job, like to help people have all the information to decide whether I'm the right coach for them or not. Yeah, I knew what you meant with the no. So like if they're in indecision, is it because I haven't given them a piece of information? Is it that they're not sure whether this is the program that's going to get them the results? Is it something else? Like, is it fear? Like 9 times out of 10, it's fear. But like, can I help them see that it's fear keeping them stuck? Or is it something else that I don't know about, right? Like sometimes there are circumstances outside of what we've talked about on the call that I don't know about. But like, it's really good to just help people see like what's the thing that's keeping them in indecision, right? That's coaching, right? So you get to coach people before you've even started working together. And I mean, someone even wrote an email to me last week saying, your follow-up questions really showed to me what a great coach you'd be to work with, right? Because they're seeing that I will hold them to account to the big vision that they've stated that they want, right? That's kind of what this follow-up process does is you said you wanted to grow your business and you said you wanted support with it, and we've reached out and had a discussion around it. So like you said, these are the things you wanted. What's keeping you stuck from making a decision? That's kind of how I see my role there. So big shift there. So I'm glad that helps. And you can kind of see the value in that from like moving from indecision to yes or no. Like, I don't care. Like, I mean, I would love to work with you guys, but I literally like, I can't work with everyone. So like, if you're a no, it's okay. Like, I'm not going to die if you tell me like no, right? I think it's the best thing that you can do is like figure out where you stand and communicate it. Awesome. We both know where everything stands. So that's kind of the first point on there. So then Sam's asked a good question about like the process. So I want to dive into this, right? So the process in terms of following up 5 to 6 times is probably the most challenging part of follow-up because what I've come to see, so I've been practicing this hard for about 6 months now. Like I follow up everyone at least 6 times. Okay. Unless if they clearly tell me no beforehand, like if on the 3rd follow-up, they're like, no, it's a no for me. Then I'm like, cool. Like we both know where we stand. I'm glad you made a decision. That's so super helpful. I trust you in making your decisions. Thanks for letting me know. I'm not going to follow up that person. So I'm either following them up until I get that clear yes or no, or to the 6th point, okay? So I think like that is hassling people. If they've said no and then you're like, you said no, but I'm going to keep following you up anyway, like that's not serving, okay? So that's not what I am advocating here. So I hope that's clear and I hope you guys would know that. So then how do you actually follow up people 6 times, right? This is the thing that's kind of annoying about follow-up is like it's all super individual, right? Because some people are, like Sam said, they're just not replying. Right? How do you follow up someone who's not replying? Some people I find reply, but don't answer the questions at all and write something completely different. Like I'll be like, how are you going with your growing your business? And they're like, oh yeah, like my grandma came over and it's school holidays, and like they tell me all this stuff, and I'm like, yeah, but how are you going with growing your business? Like they don't answer the question. So like the follow-up looks super different for everyone. And I feel like what I used to think was like, surely there's just like a cut and paste process that I do for everyone, and then I can just like check off that I've done my follow-up. But I found it super individualized. And that's why I think people don't talk about it so much, because it's hard to teach a process, right? It's hard to go like, here's step 1, here's step 2, here's step 3, because it depends on how that person responded. If they responded like, yeah, I'm super interested, but I'm scared. And I'm like, cool, what do we need to do to work through the fear? Or they're like, yeah, I'm super interested, but I don't know, I need to sign a client before I can make this investment. I'm like, cool, how do we need to look at your business and investing from a CEO perspective? Or they just don't reply, or they reply something different that's completely irrelevant, right? Like it's all okay. It's all just naturally part of the process, and we're dealing with humans. So I think that's the challenge point in terms of like, I can't say like, here's how you follow up every single person, right? It's very individualized. So that's why Sam's question is so great, because when people don't respond, I kind of will usually have, so let me go back a step. I usually kind of have a process, right? So like my process for tracking follow-ups is I put them in a spreadsheet, right? And so let's just assume it's a discovery call, okay? So I will usually confirm on the discovery call if they're not sure, or if they need to go and talk to their partner or run some numbers or digest all the information or read my website or whatever. I'll usually say like, cool, like I'll send all of that into an email for you. Can I check in with you in a couple of days and see if there's any more information you need or where your head's at? So I'll usually ask for that permission. So the first follow-up's usually going to be within a couple of days after the call, right? And then this is where it starts to branch off, because like, did they respond to that? Did they not? It's almost like a decision tree. But so assuming that they do reply, then of course, like that's just a natural progression of conversation working through. But this is where the follow-up process, as you've identified, Sam, gets tricky if like it just goes cold or they don't respond and you kind of don't know, right? Because if they respond and like, yeah, like these are the things I'm working through, blah, 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 like we're in a discussion phase. So I kind of don't need to go like, well, you need another follow-up in a week. We like let that conversation roll, right? But so when someone doesn't reply to you, which I have to say happens a lot, it happens a lot. And it's something that, it's not that it bugs me with the individual, but it just kind of bugs me about the industry as a whole, is that if you've invested time, like taken someone's time, obviously I offer up my time. It's like part of what I do, but I think there's like a certain level of like respect required to be like, you gave me your time. I'm super appreciative of that. Like I'm a no, thanks, but no thanks. Or like I'm a yes, but here's my fears, right? So if they haven't followed up, so I usually do like that, in my spreadsheet, I've kind of got like the names down one side and then like the time frames above, right? So if like I've sent the one a couple of days later, they haven't responded, I'll usually do a week, then 2 weeks, then 30 days, and then monthly afterwards. That's kind of just a rough idea. So that's the initial follow-up after the call within a couple of days, 1 week later, 2 weeks later, 1 month later, and then monthly check-ins, right? The thing is, which is good about your question, is I've had people not respond to like 2 or 3 emails, and then might be the third or the fourth one I've sent out, and they're like, oh my God, I've been meaning to respond to you. I'm so sorry that I didn't get back to your emails. And I think so many of us assume that they're a no at that point. Like they didn't write back to me. If they were interested, if they wanted it, they would have written back and said yes. So I'm cutting them off. And that's those stats I have on my phone. That's what it said. I think it said, it's really interesting. Let me just pull it up so I don't want to butcher it. 44% of salespeople give up after one no. Now they're calling it a no. I don't think we should follow up after a no. I'm just when it's an undecided. Okay. So this is more of an aggressive kind of sales process where you're still following up after a no. 22% give up after 2 no's, 14% give up after 3, and 12% give up after 4. So that the person who goes back for the 5th has it's saying that 80% of sales will convert, then they have such a high chance of following through and getting the sale there, or like signing the client. I know it can sound a bit depersonalized sometimes, and I don't mean to do that. So it's really interesting, right? So you might have sent 2 emails and didn't get responses. So you sent the one a couple of days after the discovery call, you sent one a week later, you didn't hear back. You're like, oh, they're a no. Right. And my experience has shown me people aren't a no, right? And this is where I think it's important, especially as a coach. I understand if your clients aren't coaches, like maybe they're a different group of people, maybe saying no is a challenge point for them. But I think as coaches, if they can't come back and say no, I have like a duty of responsibility to be like, I'm here to coach you through. Like, why are you not a no? Why are you not a yes, right? Like, it's a bug for me of like, why can't people say no? So I'm going to follow up. And most of the time, it's not that they can't say no. It's that I've been meaning to write back to your emails. Oh, it's lockdown. My kids are at home, like whatever, right? So many times that 3rd or 4th email has gotten the response. And I'll usually change the wording. Like it gets a bit more direct. Like, hey, I haven't heard from you. Like, what's going on? Like, are you still interested in this? Are you still considering this intensive? Are you still considering working together? I'll get a lot more direct so that they can write back and be like, no, I'm not still considering this. Thanks, but no thanks. Or like, yes, I am still considering this, but all this stuff has happened, right? So I hope that helps, Sam, on that question. How long do you leave it? So it's, for me, it's a couple of days after, 1 week after, 2 weeks after, a month after, which would, be a further 2 weeks after the 2-week follow-up, and then monthly after that. So I hope that helps. That's kind of my standard thing that I'm going to kind of work with. But then people get more conversational at different points. So like, obviously if I'm in a conversation with someone after I followed them up a week later, I'm not then going to wait 2 weeks to chat again. We're just in an email conversation there. So I hope that makes sense. And like, you follow the flow of conversation. And if that's not happening, these are kind of the check-in points, right? And I think you could still check in with people. Like if you did the monthly, like you could still check in with them with like 6 months later. How did you go with that? We talked about this like 9 months ago. Like what's happened in your life since then or whatever. So I think like that's okay. Because all that person, if they're a no, all they have to do is write, I'm not interested. Thank you. Okay. Oops, let me scroll down. Yep. Okay, cool. So that's just some examples of why I follow up 5 or 6 times and kind of my thoughts on it and how I don't view it as bugging. It's kind of like selling. Like I think so many people as new coaches have this problem with the word selling, but then it's like selling is the way that you help people create a transformation in their life, right? If you don't show them your offer and invite them in, which is kind of selling, they can't take it up and change their life. And follow-up's kind of the same. Like if I don't help you decide if you're a yes or a no, you're kind of staying stuck. So it's kind of my duty as a coach to help you decide, are you in or are you out? And if you're out, like what do you need to help you make the next decision, to find the next thing for you, right? That's still a way of serving people and helping people. So that's what I wanted to cover on that. So the last thing I want to do is just give some examples, because here's the thing we never hear. And I was sharing this with one of my clients maybe a week or 2 ago, and she's like, wow, like I had no idea, right? Because I think what we hear is we hear people say like, I signed a client this week. I had 4 discoveries calls this week and signed a client, 4 clients the next week or whatever. Or like I had a 10K month. I had a this, I had a that. But we're not seeing that process, right? And a percentage of my people do hop on a call and do say yes, like straight away or within that first follow-up, right? But there are a percentage of people that are in the follow-up process, and it's normal, okay? And it's not like I haven't run the numbers, so I can't say like how long on average it is, but I just wanted to give some examples so that you can see. So if you're kind of in that messy follow-up process and you're like, it's not supposed to be like this, like no one's ever talking about this, am I doing it right? It's okay, and it's very normal, right? It's just a conversation we're not seeing. And I think because it's very hard to teach a very distinct process, that I think people are kind of maybe avoiding the conversation on this. So like I was running a client through some examples. So for example, I had a client who initially told me that she wanted to work together in January, right? In January. And we signed the contract last week in April. Okay. So that was the 3-month process, right? And I think this is what we're not seeing. Okay. So someone said, I'm interested in working with you in January. They became a client in mid-April. Okay. That's just one example, right? Another example is I signed a client recently who just appeared to kind of pop out of the blue, like, want to book a discovery call, let's start working together. And she'd been sitting in my group since it opened for like a year, right? So like these are the things we're not seeing in terms of like the touch points and the follow-up process and the care that goes behind the scenes to support people into making that decision. And I think it's important to talk about. So hands up if you kind of thought like, if people are like aren't a yes on the discovery call, then I just kind of move on and find more people. Is that kind of like a messaging that you hear around? Or like if someone's not a yes, this is something like, if someone's not a yes, they're just not willing, and they're like, they should know that they're a yes straight away. So I'm not willing to invest energy in them and I'm just going to move on. Like, do you hear stuff like that around the online space? I know I hear it, and it's not necessarily true all of the time. So let me think of another example. So another example is I had a client start with me a couple of months ago, and the follow-up process was very not clear cut, right? So this is where I'm just trying to give you examples so you can see behind the scenes in my business. So this woman, it's no one, like, I don't want anyone to be able to be identified, but like she'd worked with a coach before and had a really bad experience and ended up firing that coach. And so then she was still looking for support in her business. But of course she was like hesitant, like, how do I make sure I hire the right person? So our follow-up process was very, it wasn't super linear. It was like, it seemed like she wanted the support. We talked about it. We did one of my free calls. She got great value out of that. We chatted in the emails. I offered her another discovery call. She hopped on the discovery call and then was still kind of like, we were working through like, what's the thing that's stopping you from making a decision here, right? So I think we don't see that. So I offered a free call. I followed up in emails. I offered a second discovery call. I followed up in emails. And then she came across and booked in one of my intensives. And from there, she moved into my coaching program. So we never see that, right? Who has ever seen someone sharing that kind of detail of like the sign-up process? I'd love to hear if that's kind of something you've heard about before, or kind of you've been wondering about before, but you haven't necessarily seen. Because I think we think it's going to be so clean. Like, we have a discovery call, they say yes or no, done. And that's just not always the experience. Does that happen? Yes, of course it happens. But a big percentage, it doesn't happen, right? And the stats are showing us 80% of people will decide after a 5th follow-up. So I think with that woman, it was very compressed. We did all of that over probably like a week or two, but there was probably still like 10 different touch points in that process that supported her to make the decision, right? I'm just trying to think of another example. I had a woman who, she didn't end up working with me, but we had a discovery call and she was interested like every month, and we were still talking like 10 months later, right? 10 months later, and she still wasn't ready to make a decision. So I think it's so interesting to see the decision process. And there were some stats on that sales page, which I didn't screenshot, but it was saying the length of like the trail time for people, to make a decision after a sales discussion. And there was a huge percentage of people, I think it took like 4 months and then 6 months, right? So you're not doing something wrong as a coach if people are taking time to make a decision. Because I think a lot of the time there is a lot of fear involved in growing and transforming and changing and really going after your dreams and investing in yourself, right? We all have a lot of fear around that. And that's often the thing that people need to work through and process. So if you're finding that you're having discovery calls, like there's a point where like if nothing is converting, like have a look at that. I'm not saying like, there's no work to do there. But if you're in the follow-up process and it's feeling like people are in that process and it's not feeling super clean and linear and like, everyone doesn't follow the same path, what I really want you to know from this today is like, that's okay. And in fact, I think it's quite normal, right? I think it's quite normal, especially obviously the higher ticket the investment is in your program, the longer it's going to take for people to make a decision. For some people, it's very like, it's just a huge decision. And I totally get that. So like, that's why my job is to support them through that. If they said that they want something and they've got fears and things to work through, like part of my job is to help them do that, because that's getting out of your own way and that's coaching. So I'm just trying to think of any other examples that spring to mind of kind of a long sales process or like long follow-up process. I have people on my spreadsheet that I'm following up still from last year. So like, it's okay. So once someone says no, I'll obviously like remove them off the spreadsheet. I don't follow them up anymore. But there are people who are still undecided that I met with in like November and December last year. That's fine. Like, it's normal. It's actually only been 5 or 6 months, right? So I really wanted to share that with you as like a permission piece. And you're not doing it wrong if you're in a messy kind of follow-up process. Like, this is I think why I was resisting it for so long, because I was like, but like, how do I do it? Like, what are the steps? Like, what do I do for each person? Like, I almost wanted like templates, I think, that I could copy and paste into emails and be like, this is what I paste on the 3rd follow-up. This is what I paste on the 4th follow-up. And I found that it's a bit more, it's not as scientific as that, right? There's a bit of like, it's relationship building, it's engaging with people. So it's interesting just to like commit to what you're going to do. So if your commitment is like, I'm committing to following up 6 times, right? Like, that's the non-negotiable. And then I'm willing to experiment with what feels right for each person along the way to do that. I think that's the art part. And then the process part is like, but I do it 6 times and then I redecide. So Dee's saying, I haven't seen that being discussed on the socials much at all, but I know it happens from my past career. Exactly. Follow-ups are so important. So it's great that you're starting this discussion on this. I had a customer come back to me 6 months later to book her holiday after I'd written her off as I had had no replies to any follow-ups. An unexpected family situation just meant she was occupied elsewhere. Exactly. I remember being so surprised when she walked in the door and booked. Exactly. So it's great that you've got that past evidence to draw on, because a lot of people haven't worked in a sales role before, right? So you've got so much experience to draw on from like past sales roles. Most people, like, I've never literally worked in sales before I started my own business. So like, I didn't have this kind of to draw on, but it's so interesting, right? And so like, I've had that experience too, where someone's like, oh, you've written me your 3rd or 4th email. I feel so bad that I haven't written back. This has all been going on, like exactly what you're saying, like a family situation's happened, or I broke my arm, or like all kinds of things. Like, we never know what's happening. And I think like, it's been my biggest lesson as like growing into being a coach and growing a business is like, never assume what's going on for people. Too often we jump to the assumption that they're a no, or they're not willing, or they mustn't want it. And we can't know, like, did they break their arm? Have they, I don't know, just gone through a divorce? Like, I don't know, I'm just making things up. But like, has it been school holidays? Like, if you work with mums, like, has it been a busy time in their day job, right? Like, there's so many factors that can happen. And most people, I feel like, don't like having loose ends, right? So one of my previous coaches, some of you guys will know her, Rachel McDonald. She's like a big advocate for like closing the loops, right? Because it takes energy in your brain, right? If someone has asked you a question and you haven't responded, or you've initiated a conversation with someone and they've given you information back and you haven't responded, it takes up energy in your brain. So there's like this beautiful thing of like closing off loops. Like, yes, I'm still interested. No, I'm not, right? But from the coach's perspective, like with their clients or like in the sales process, there's a huge benefit of not assuming what's going on for people, because most times we don't know. Like this woman, as you said, had unexpected family stuff come up. I've had people who are like, on the third or fourth follow up, yeah, like, I'm so sorry, this thing's been happening, right? Like, it's 9 times out of 10, it's not that they're a no, okay? If they ghost the 6 follow up process, like the 6 emails in the follow up, and they haven't responded to any, then I will usually make a decision that I'm going to let them go. Like, not that like I'm letting them go, they're on the hook, but it's like, it's not an even energy exchange anymore. Like, I've shown up for the process and I've been really willing to help you see, like, is this the thing to help you get the result that you said you wanted? Like, you said you wanted this thing. I've got the solution. You showed interest. You want to have a discussion about it. I'm here to kind of help you see if it's the thing or if it's not. And if it's not, I'm actually here to help you see what might be the thing instead, or what information you need, or what would be a better fit. But if someone doesn't give that even energy exchange, and like they haven't responded to a single email or whatever, at that point I'm like, I redecide, right? So I think like there's the freedom to redecide at that 6 follow-up. Like, is this someone who's still like offering an energy exchange and like still needs further support? Or is this someone that like isn't open, I guess, to the process of being supported through making a decision? So I think that's super helpful. That's kind of how I look at it. So I hope that has come through there in terms of how I view it, because I know sometimes when we talk about sales process, like, you know, like I cut them loose or I get them off the hook, like that's not what I mean at all. I don't ever feel that anyone's on the hook or anyone, I feel like there's a responsibility for people to like be open and be like, I'm not interested, or I'm still interested, I'm working through these fears or whatever. But I see it as my job to help them facilitate that, okay? In the end, I actually don't mind if people say no to me. I honestly don't mind, because like I'm good. Like my business is good. I'm good. If you as an individual don't see it's the right program, don't see it's the right fit, like I'm cool. Like it's good. Like I'm happy to know that. So like I really see it as like an opportunity to help people see what's holding them back. The sales process I've come to see is like the first place people can see what's holding them back. Ding, ding, ding. It's usually fear. Okay. Just cutting to the chase. It's usually fear, right? But our job is to help them see that. Not necessarily in your line of work, Dee, before, like with that customer, like that probably wasn't a fear thing. But as coaches, you know, if we dive into the sales process for coaches, the thing that's usually holding people back is fear. Because if they say they want the thing and they can see that you've got the answer to the thing that they want and they want to do it, like it has to be fear or some other circumstance, unusual circumstance that's in their way. So I hope that's given you like an insight into follow-up. I wanted to share some funny examples just so you know, like my process isn't super clean cut either. It's never like, well, sometimes it is. Sometimes it's like, I want to work with you. I've been watching for ages. I have a discovery call. I'm a yes on the call. We sign the contract at like that day. That does sometimes happen. Be open and available for that and know it's a possibility. But also just be open and available for like, some people will need time to warm up and to decide and to work through that decision-making process. And that's also okay. So as I've said, like I've had people who I've done multiple touch points with in a short period of time and over longer periods of time too. And it's all okay. But I think what I want you to take away from this is decide what is your process for your business. So like for me, I've decided with the help of my coach, she pushed me, that I do 6 follow-ups for everyone. And at that point, I redecide. Do they still need further support, or is it no longer an even energy exchange? That's how I look at it versus it's not that I let them go. It's like, this is no longer an even energy exchange. So like we can end the process here. So what I want you to do is decide what your follow-up process is going to be, and don't waver from that commitment to yourself, okay? But know that the way that you get there for each individual may look quite different, right? That's the art part. There's an art and a science, I think, here. The science is like the 6 touch points and 80% of the people will convert. The art is like, how do I like move that discussion forward and have that discussion with each individual, because they've got different objections, they've got different things going on. they just naturally are someone who's more risk averse or takes longer to make decisions or whatever. So I really want to share that with you today as an insight. Okay, so the main system I use for tracking follow-ups is an Excel spreadsheet and my Google Calendar. Super exciting. So an Excel spreadsheet to track everyone and track the follow-up. So like I will literally, it's got the names, it's got 1 week follow-up, 2 week follow-up, 1 month follow-up, and then, follow up the next 4, right? And all I do is I plug in the date which I last followed up with them, right? So then if, for example, I don't know, I'm just going to make up D because she's right there. Like just say I followed up with D today, I'd write 24th of April. And then I'll put a note in my calendar a month from now if she's due for a 1 month checkup, follow up, check in, whatever. I'll put that in my calendar. So I'd usually put a note in my calendar for the 24th of May after April, check in with D. It's that sophisticated, right? So I think like we can make these things more complicated than they are, and we can wish that they were different or easier or whatever. But that's as simple as it is. And then I do like follow up Friday. So every Friday I'll spend time like who needs a follow up this week? Where am I at? Who haven't I heard from? Who's waiting in my inbox wanting a response? All of that kind of stuff. So that's kind of how I run it, and it has worked well. So as I've said before, like this wasn't something I used to do. But then over the last 6 months, there's been something I've really been working on, and I'm seeing it. So just like I mentioned before, like following up with people and checking in has meant that people who technically we might write off after the second touch point have come on board and become clients. So I can see how some people need just different levels of support, just like everything in life, different levels of support to make that decision. So I hope that's been helpful. I hope there's something you can take away from that. I've got some different topics I want to dive into in the coming weeks. Next week, I'm going to be doing a breakdown of my 5-figure month in April. So I kicked the goal. I'm super excited to share that with you. And I want to share with you a behind the scenes on that, because I think these are the things that are super valuable. Is like, I could write a post for you guys, like how I kicked my 5-figure month in April, right? But there's always more layers to it, okay, that I want to share with you. So that's coming next week. I'm super excited to share that with you. I hope this has been helpful. I hope you have a great Friday. And yeah, look forward to chatting with you all again soon. Thank you for being here. Bye. I don't know how to end the live video there.